Calling the meeting to order. It is, I don't have my glasses, I can't see the clock.
7:08 p.m.
Thank you, 7:08.
I do this every day.
No issue, ask me whatever you want. So in terms of roll call, I guess I'm open to the way that we do this. The last year we did it, everybody called out who was here. Does that make sense for us to proceed, or do we want to just do you want me to call out everybody that's in the room and remote and then just document it? Okay.
That's probably the better way, Tom.
Okay, so we'll proceed where, chair or vice chair, whoever's sitting, will call out the attendees. And let's see if I got everybody's name correct. Oh boy. There's Leah. So we'll start with Leah Borla.
Present.
And myself, Tom Downing, Megan, how do you say it? Fallon?
Fallon, yep, you got it. Here.
Tom Clow.
Here.
Eileen Meany, moderator. Naomi Bolton,
Yeah.
town administrator. We've got Gary Evans. And then we've got Bill Anderson. And James, I'm going to mess up his name, Drury. Is that James Drury? And I'll get to the guests afterward. On the phone, we have Neil Kirk.
Here.
Do we have Tammy Hagman?
Yes, I'm here.
Who else do we have on the phone? And Rachel Sisto.
Yep, right here.
Did I say your name right?
Yeah, you did actually.
Wow. Is there anybody else on the phone? Okay, and in the audience, we have Jack Dearborn. Perfect. All right.
No Dennis, no Nicole.
So in a total count, what's that give us for a count? Just so I know we have a quorum.
Tom, you didn't mention Christine Haig.
Doesn't look like she's on the line, but we can stop for a second. Chris, are you on the line? No, Neil, we can't see her. You probably can see a participant list maybe better than mine, but she's not with us yet.
And she's not on the list that I'm looking at.
Okay, so she's not in attendance. So I'll just do a quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have a quorum. We're good to go. All right, so old business. We'll start with meeting minutes. And so we'll discuss meeting minutes, any edits, things of that sort. Someone did call out there was some potential edits or concerns to previous minutes. Now would be the time to discuss them, revise, come up with a plan to revise.
Add 2, just names.
Tom, I have some.
I'm going to propose from an etiquette standpoint, let's try and get to the online people because I think they're going to get snubbed just because of the delay, if you don't mind, Tom.
No, it's fine.
And Neil was one of the people that brought it up in advance. So we'll start with Neil.
Do you want me to talk now?
Yes, Neil, go ahead.
Okay. The first sentence, the word a regular meeting is incorrect. I think it should be the annual organization meeting. At the end of that sentence, you should add by Vice Chairman Neil Kirk. The meeting, you normally have a meeting called to order by someone. The next sentence should read, no exact time was recorded as a secretary had not been elected. The meeting was held in the Weare Town Hall Selectmen's Conference Room. Delete by Tom Downing because he didn't hold the meeting. The next section where it says present, it's a little confusing to have a title of present and then the last name absent. So if we're going to record absences, I think it probably would be clearer if it were in a separate column. The next sentence, the next section, approval of minutes. I think that needs to be deleted. It's not clear to me whether we ever approved the minutes of the last meeting of the Finance Committee, which was sometime last year. This committee, as you know, is ongoing. The members serve for 3 years. The officers serve for 1, but the committee is ongoing. So this is not the inaugural meeting of the Finance Committee. Whether those minutes from the last meeting were approved or not, I don't remember. Maybe Bill Anderson, who took them, does remember. If they were not, we need to approve them. Going to open.
Hey, Neil,
Yeah.
can I have just stop for a quick second?
Sure.
So what I'm hearing is some suggested edits, some suggestions in format change, some challenges to some of the wording. And so we're kind of all over the place as to what you'd like to see. I'd like to stop to Leah and say, are you following this? And
Well,
where should we start? Because
I can do some of the changes with adding how it was called to order. That's fine. And take out your name because you didn't call it to order. Some of these I put together before I was actually.
of course.
Yeah, so it's come just from recollection. That's fine.
Yeah.
As it pertains to the way the structure of the meeting minutes set, I mean, I write these every day for multi-million-dollar companies. This is not a different. I mean, it's not a corporate minute, so it doesn't need to be as detailed as corporate minutes would be. So as for the structure, I don't see an issue.
So I'd like to ask a question then. So, Neil, is there anything from your perspective, because you're the one that brought this up, where there needs to be a specific format required by law? Or
No.
is this one of those other items where our committee just decides what's feasible?
The committee decides what's feasible. Whatever works for the committee, whatever will most clearly present the minutes. There's no required format, with one exception. All of the votes, any motion, and the result of that motion must be recorded, which we always do. But other than that, where there's no requirement as to what has to be in the minutes or what doesn't have to be in the minutes. Legal requirement.
So I'm going to throw this out there. I'm not making a motion. I'm just going to give you my perspective. I don't have a preference for the way that we record the minutes as long as the meeting is reasonably accurate. And so I would like to just open the discussion without a motion to say, anybody have concerns about the format, the specific format that Leah is using to record the minutes?
No.
Okay. Anybody on the phone? Is Tammy muted or unmuted? Tammy had some feedback and Naomi had to mute her for a minute. Tammy, any
Problems with the
concerns?
structure.
What'd she say?
She said she had no concerns with the structure.
Okay, so with that, I think we collectively decided that the format is fine.
Mhm.
And so now we're back at the content of the meeting minutes.
Shall I continue?
Well, I'm gonna,
Tom, I can help this. I can help if you wish by writing up and distributing to everybody the suggestions I'm making for changes. That would make it easier for the secretary and the members, but of course, it probably means that we couldn't actually approve the minutes tonight.
well, we also have, Tom had a couple suggestions as well. And for anybody else, but I like the idea of that. And I think in an ideal world, we're going to walk away. We're going to have meetings within a reasonable amount of time and everybody will have advance notice to send their inputs. I think tonight's exception. Is that the case? Okay. So the proposal is Neil's going to write that up. And when would you be sending that to Leah, Neil?
Tomorrow.
Okay. So are you okay if we move on to the next set of comments then?
Well, I have a lot more on the minutes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I thought you were going to send all of them.
I will if you want, but some of them are much more controversial than the ones I've discussed so far. So you probably want to.
So I think what you're saying is you want to discuss the topics that you think are up for discussion or debate.
Yes.
That's what this is for, right?
Okay.
But do me a favor, Neil, if you could do me a favor, just stop between the topics so we all can take a moment, see if anybody has any feedback.
Sure.
Response. That would be great.
The next one is open issues, and I think that should be titled open positions. But in any event, the moderator, Eileen Meany, stated that there were, the word were is missing, that there were 3 open positions on the committee. She introduced the current members of the committee. The next sentence should be deleted, I think. Mrs. Meany appointed 3 new members, Rachel Sisto, Leah Borla, and Bill Anderson, and a new sentence added. They were sworn in to serve 3-year terms. Under new business.
Hold on. That seems reasonable and accurate. I would just say that's, it's preferential wording, and he does make a point that it doesn't say that Eileen appointed, which she did. So if nobody has an objection, I'd say we just move forward and let Leah make that edit. Okay.
Under new business, some very small technical changes, which I'll put in my comments to Leah. On the second line, nominations were not accepted. Nominations were in order to fill the openings for the 3 positions. Then I think there's an error here. Megan, I think after the word secretary on the last line on that page, you need to insert nominations were open for chairman. That was the first thing we did. And then Megan Fallon was nominated not by Tom Downing, but by Neil Kirk, and she respectfully declined. On the next page, Tom Downing was nominated by Megan Fallon, and Tom Clow, he wasn't nominated by Neil Kirk. I don't know who nominated him.
Gary Evans.
Gary.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
This was,
Also, Leah doesn't know the name, so we'll give her a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think
I
anybody's angry about it. I think, but I do think Neil is right. But
Yeah.
let's
No, I
make
agree.
it
votes were submitted by secret ballot, and the majority vote was for Tom Downing. Whenever there's a vote, which was actually other than a voice vote, you need to record the numbers. And so it was 8-4 for Tom, as I recall. Somebody could correct me if I'm wrong. Then you need to insert a sentence. Nominations were opened for vice chairman. Tammy Hagman was nominated not by me. I don't know who nominated her.
I nominated her. Tom.
Tom Clow. So Tom Clow nominated her.
these I just did from memory because I wasn't.
Yep. Tammy was nominated by Tom Clow for vice chair, and she respectfully declined. Megan Thalen was nominated by Tom for vice chair and accepted the nomination. You didn't accept the position like that. You need to insert, as there were no other nominations, she was declared elected. Bill Anderson was nominated for nominations were then open for secretary. Bill Anderson was nominated, but requested that another person or volunteer be nominated. But if there were no nominations, he would accept. Leah Borla volunteered for committee secretary, and Bill Anderson respectfully declined. And then you need to insert a sentence there. As there were no other nominations, Leah Borland was declared elected. And then she has the election results.
Hey, Neil.
Yeah.
In this instance, that was a lot. And I think that
I'll put it all in writing.
Yeah, I think notionally we agree with what you're saying, but procedurally you've got to use, and maybe that's what you use.
I'll tell you what I do to speed things up. I'll just talk about the substantive issues, and I'll put all of the technical changes in writing and send it to everybody, including Leah, obviously. Next paragraph is incomplete. Leah and I had a very extensive discussion about the nature of some of the comments that Eileen raised. I started off and Leah responded. There's nothing in these minutes which indicates either what Eileen said or what the discussion was. And I think that was very important because it deals with the role of the committee and how we're supposed to operate. I don't have language there, but something needs to be. If the next paragraph is accurate, but it's not very informative. And I understand why it might have been done this way, but we might want to ask ourselves how much clarity we want here and how much information. Everything in this paragraph is said, it's said very nicely, but it doesn't reflect the nature of the discussion, as opposed to the prior paragraph where a significant amount of the discussion was omitted. And it leaves the impression that the committee was very content with Eileen's discussion and either agreed with it or didn't disagree with it.
Can I interrupt you, Neil, just for a second? I'm not going
And those are,
I'm just looking
those
for
are
clarity.
Yep.
Neil, we move right to the other paragraph, but let's back up to Eileen's paragraph.
Yep.
Express some opinion towards the comments that Eileen made, and it sounds like you would like us to note some of your opinions, or the fact that you had differentiating opinions from Eileen. Is that what you're saying?
Tom, something's happening to the sound. You're breaking up.
How about now?
It's a little better. The television picture is also jerky.
Oh, yeah. Jerky.
Jerky.
I'm just looking at the signal here. Any better here, Neil?
No, no. None of you are moving, and when you move in sort of like an old silent picture.
Let's
Not
focus
enough
on,
frames per second.
I'd rather focus on audio first to make sure we can hear each other. So let's do that. Am I any clearer now?
Yes.
I just moved the speaker a little bit. So my point was going to be, and my questions are going to be, at a very high level, it sounds like the paragraph regarding expectations of the mission of the Finance Committee, you didn't feel as if your opinions or your responses to Eileen's perspective was recorded. Is that correct?
I don't think Eileen's statements are incorporated there. Definitely my response and Leia's response are in there. I think if we're trying to give folks a sense of what's going on in this committee, that discussion needs to be in there.
Okay, but the problem that we have, Neil, is nobody here documented that discussion in detail, and Leah was doing the best she could on her first night. So if you want to write something up, and we will, as a group, the whole committee, make a decision whether it's accurate or not, let's just do that, because to be frank, we're having a discussion based on your recollection, and every single person here could do the same thing. We'd be here all night about and revisit the argument. And it would just be better if you said, here's my recollection, to see if the whole committee agrees, Neil.
I'd be glad to do that, but just remember that, like you and everyone else, my recollection is probably not as fulsome as it needs to be. So I hope all of us together can reconstruct what was said. Apparently, we didn't have a YouTube recording of this, and there was no other kind of recording. So it really depends on all of us putting our collective heads together and trying to remember what was said. But I'll take a stab at it and distribute it to everybody.
It just also be noted. I'm looking back at the meeting minutes from last year. Like, it is discussed, and sometimes there is exactly what someone said, but a lot of times it's not. It's just kind of generally like, this is what was. I mean, she's not a court stenographer, so I mean, we have to decide, like, how elaborate do we want these notes to be. That's just a thought.
Tom?
Yeah, I agree. So it's like when we did board meetings and even got legal advice on the Board of Selectmen's meeting, you know, it doesn't have to be a word for word of what's going on at the meeting. It's a matter of, especially as Neil said earlier, any decisions that are made have to be properly recorded. But, you know, beyond that, you know, I mean, we could be here until 8 o'clock just discussing minutes.
Gary, did you have something to say?
I basically do the same thing. So, yeah, I mean, I think, why wouldn't it be all right just to say there was just a discussion about the role of the Finance Committee? I mean, I certainly wouldn't care to have it be more specific.
I mean, if we want me to generalize that Eileen Meany went over this, and there was a disagreement or, Neil disagreed with that and there was discussion. But I don't think it needs to be detailed.
Yeah, I just suggest Bill took minutes for several years.
Bill, yeah, it's Bill's turn.
I guess I got to come up to yeah, I haven't done this for about 5 of the 6 years I was on the previous tour. Haven't been in the military. I understand what Neil's saying, but I also look at it. I know a lot of times when I was doing it, I did generalize that each side had, because I think the focus of what we do, and we want to get more specific, is when we get down to our recommendations that go out in the
Right.
flyer
Mhm.
to make sure that is specific and the votes are recorded. But I think we sometimes can get very too far in the weeds. And I don't think if we get too he said, she said early on, I don't think that makes for a healthy focus moving forward.
So I have a question for everybody on the committee. If in fact Neil wants to be very deep in these meetings, that's his right to do that and ask for that. But if we decide as a committee that we would like generalizations without the he said, she said, can't we certainly come to a vote and make a decision on how deep or how we will record these minutes? And I'm sincerely asking that question.
I would think so. I would think that as us as the board, like as long as we have meeting minutes and they give the public a sense of what happened in the meeting and we're recording votes and that something of a little sense of what the discussion was, then yes, I don't think that we need to go to the point of Neil said, Eileen said in the back and forth. We could do what Matt had done when he did the meeting minutes and he put it out in Google Docs and then people could put their comments out there. But I think that we're getting into the weeds. I just think that it just generalized. That's what meeting minutes are.
I think if there's excuse me.
No, you're fine.
If there's something that's actually wrong,
Mhm.
like the wrong name,
Yes.
we correct it. If there's a grammatical error that's like,
Mhm.
correct it. But to totally reinterpret the minutes, to me, we could go on and on because as you've said, Tom, and others have, there could be 3 or 4 different interpretations or more.
I mean, I'll write
13
them
different
however you want me to write.
interpretations.
It's up to you guys.
So do we vote on it then?
Well, if someone has to make a motion before we vote on something, I wasn't proposing a motion, but I wanted to throw it to the committee. That, Neil has a right to be heard in his opinion, which is what we're doing here, but if someone.
I happen to agree with Bill and probably Tom also that this shouldn't be he said, she said with names, but the nature of the discussion is very informative both to the committee as it goes back or when it goes back sometime in January to see where we've been, and also for people who are not attending the meetings but are reading the minutes to know what some of the issues were. But it can be done very nicely without he said, she said. I agree with Bill on that.
It sounds to me like we're all in agreement, but there's probably a gray area on how deep to go. And so I think we all agree we don't want he said, she said. Neil, as far as getting into the actual context of the details of the specific discussion, I don't think that is reasonable to ask of Leah or any of us. I think it's a generality, which is we had a discussion on this topic. So-and-so spoke on that topic. During the discussion, there was a disagreement or it was a heated disagreement. Both parties spoke, the matter was resolved, the matter was not resolved.
I agree, Tom, but that is not in here, and that's what needs to be in here.
Okay, so it sounds like we're all in an agreement then that moving forward, that's what we're going to do. On the phone, Tammy and Rachel? Comments, questions?
Yeah, I agree.
You good?
I'm good.
So
I'm
I would,
taking notes.
here's what I would say, Neil. We did offer for you to send your suggestions, and I would say to still do that in this instance, because not all of us recall it. So I think it's still a good idea in this instance for at least those 2 paragraphs.
And anything that
I will
happens.
send in.
And anything that happened
I-
before, I was actually appointed as the secretary.
Not really sure.
I don't know. I was all recollection.
Okay, so Neil, can we go into anything that's factually wrong? Can we jump right into that now that we agree? Anything else, excuse me, that you thought was factually wrong?
No, I'm okay. I'll send a copy of the proposed changes to Leah and to everybody else in the committee sometime tomorrow.
Okay, so
Perfect.
I'm going to pass the floor to Tom because he did have something to add. Did you add everything you wanted or you have a few
No,
other
they were
things?
already made, the corrections of names for the nominations and things. That's the only thing that I
Great
had.
minds, you and Neil think alike.
And I just noticed how brief I was.
Hey, Leah,
Fair enough.
Just a small thing. My last name is actually LLEN.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. Instead of every single meeting minute be wrong.
If any of us were perfect, we would not be here. We'd be out
That
making
is
millions of
for
dollars somewhere
sure.
else.
Again.
All right, so we're going to move. We are not going to vote on minutes. We're going to reserve that to,
So motion to table the approval of the minutes.
do I need to make a motion for that? Okay, no.
You don't?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're not going to vote on meeting minutes. I make too many motions, I've been told before, so.
Okay.
So we're gonna go to, any other items on old business? Typically, this would be outstanding questions. Somebody had follow-up actions. They need to follow up with the town committee or anything. I don't think we had any outstanding actions, questions, things of that sort, but I'm gonna throw it out there. Other than the audio system getting worked on. Okay, online, are we good? Okay, so
Yes.
we're gonna move to subcommittee reports. I guess we'll start with the town. I know not a lot has happened here, but as far as the town subcommittee, is there anything? Yes, go ahead, Bill.
Suggestion on the agenda. We really got, we got Tom tied up here. Maybe move to the CIP.
I'm in favor. I don't think we need to vote. Let's just ask everybody. Is everybody in favor of letting Jack, of bumping up new business and Jack Dearborn?
Sorry, I'm getting older.
Everybody on the phone, it'd be good to hear from the folks on the phone just in case we can't hear you.
Yeah, that's fine. Just so you know, Tom, I and some others who are zooming in can only hear Tom clearly when somebody speaks. We couldn't hear what Bill said really, except when he was at the microphone.
Okay, apologies. Bill, we didn't send Bill to the microphone. We'll try very hard to do that. Okay, Neil? I just want to make sure you heard me.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tammy and Rachel, are you good?
I'm good. Audio keeps cutting out, so I can only hear maybe half of what's going on. But I'm good with moving on.
Okay, with that, we'll, let's call Jack Dearborn up. He's going to go through the CIP presentation.
Oh, you one, maybe two. Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay? Is it okay if I take my mask off?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Thanks. Maybe it's better with it on. Good evening. My name is Jack Dearborn. I'm the chairman of the Weare Capital Improvement Program. This is the third stop on a three-stop journey. I have been before the planning board. There was a 3-1 vote to forward it to the select board. Went to the select board Monday night. They didn't take a vote, but we had questions and I eventually left. So I'm sure they got the input. And today I'm here for the Finance Committee. First, I'd like to recognize some individuals that helped contribute to this CIP. Sue Richmond, Vice Chair, Steve Roberts, Gary Shelto, John Osmond, ex officio, and Bruce Fillmore was a planning board member. On page 3, let me just go through this real quick. If you go through New Hampshire RSA 674, 5 through 8, happens to be here. It's 2 pages worth. I printed it out. It basically defines what a CIP program is. In order to have a CIP program, what you need to do is first have a master plan accepted by the town, establish a planning board, and then basically the planning board has 2 significant activities. One is the land use, which most people familiarize with. The second one is a CIP requirement. The CIP committee is a subcommittee to the planning board. We need to follow the RSAs. So I believe it's compliant. We've been doing that since 2011, I can remember. Page 4 and 5 is an eye chart, but it's intended to show all the requests for this year, capital reserve fund balances. And we also are required by the RSAs to give a plan going out 6 years. So what you will see is these columns to the right with the dates on it. 2021 is our current, and this is the total. The following presentation. Anybody seen this presentation format before? I think some people have. Anyways, we'll go through it. What I do is I will take each department individually and talk about all the requests and then go to the next department. So anytime anybody's got a question, feel free to bring it up. So basically, for 2021, the total grant request is 1.4, is that a 9 or an 8? $8725 million. Going on to page 6 and 7, this is basically what we call our whiteboard exercise. This is what we finally settle on for the given year of capital request. And you can see we have a department, a request, the type of description, request priority, request dollar value, taxation, impact of taxes. Sometimes there are some funds that reduce the value of the request. So we talk about the impact of taxes, which may be different than the request. And then we do the impact to the tax. In this case, for the fire department, it's 0 because we have a special revenue fund, which equipment and I guess equipment comes out of those budgets. So the priority here, if you went back to page 4 and 5, and if you reference page 3, you'll see urgent and necessary, and a note down below, all 2021, all necessary requests for the first year. So the first 2 are in the current year. If you went to like 2022 through 6, those are the priority 3, 4, 5, and 6, not in the current year. So that's the requirement of the CIP.
Jack, just a quick question. Is that respectively when you said by year in terms of urgency?
But it's not exactly, but I'm just saying.
Roughly speaking.
2021, 1 and 2 are the top priorities. The only difference between the first one and the second one, one is by safety and others is necessary, urgent.
Okay, I see that 2 to 4 years.
For some reason, they're distinguished. I could leave you the way whether it was just 1 category or 2. It doesn't really matter. Just happens to be the highest one is only because it's in that place for life and safety. So these 2 pages, page 6 and 7, are the requests. And the total impact, this is netted out after all the block grant from the highway, any money is coming from the special revenue fund. The total net request for 21 that's actually in the category of net request is $738,350 dollars, and the impact is $1.35 dollars to the tax rate. And then later on, you'll see that it's actually lower than last year's of what we actually approved. So this is impact as if everything passed. Last year, you'll see later on at the last page, everything that actually passed was $1.39 for last year. So we're actually 4 cents down. If we want to go to page 8, this amplifies on the topic of the fire departments. And Naomi does it, but I asked her to cut and paste that line so you have it fresh up here. And here's all the backup information. So truck 2 basically has an issue with a pump. This is the principal asset of the town. And what happens is it has to get repaired. So basically, it's a $20,000 estimate for dropping that out of the bottom of the vehicle, doing the necessary repairs and installing it back and recertifying it. The fire department had 3 requests after discussions. He needs this one for this year, and he's pushing the other 2 out. And I think one was for a pickup truck replacement. And what was the second one?
The striker cots.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, yeah. The other one is for, in the back of the 2 ambulances we have, there is an apparatus to retain the cot. And the cots pull out and they wheel it to wherever they got to go. And to put the cot back into the vehicle again, it's an power assist to get it back in, because, 2 people, undetermined size of the 2 people, and an undetermined size of a person. This makes it so easier, so you don't have to go get 4 or 5 people in some cases, certain conditions. But he felt he can go off to next year on this one. So we did move 2 out. Any questions on this one? It's basically the pump, and it is offset by the special revenue fund. Next one is police department. The police chief, we had quite a few conversations where there was a debate whether he needed a pickup truck or he needed a regular car or whatever it was, or multiple. And we finally settled on replacing from the front line where the current vehicle that's going to be pushed down for his vehicle is the 2013 Explorer. That's got high mileage. It's can be used for the chief car, if you will. And we're asking to replace that one with a new Tahoe SUV. And this price tag is $61,000. And that's an estimate. It may come in cheaper, but we need to get the right number to have enough money to buy the car. The quantity and the value of the car is known as far as what needs to go in it. When the final bids come in, it should be less. That impact to the taxes would be 7 cents to the tax rate.
Question. So
Yes.
last year, we were,
Hey, Gary, can we just do a check to see if Neil can hear you ask the question? Go ahead. Neil would like to, or someone on the phone confirm that you can hear Gary speaking when he asks his question.
last year we needed, he said he needed 2. So well, I'm kind of curious as to what. I mean, another year went by and he needs less.
Well, it's even worse than that when I get a little further into this, because last year the request was 2 and the need was 2.
Right.
It got shot down. So the opinion of the CIP, 1 or none. So he absolutely needs 1. He needs 2. It'll be horrendous to go another year. And I'll explain why in a few minutes, but it's a good point. You are correct. So we finally settled on one. This is a particular type of vehicle. It's not just a run-of-the-mill Tahoe you buy out of the off the factory floor, if you will. This is a SUV pursuit vehicle to specifications. Here's some of the generalized room in the cab, storage, and all that kind of stuff. One of the things over the charges this would benefit is the fact that there is a lot of stuff that needs to be put in a police car that responds to an accident or whatever. That's beyond everything. I mean, there's first aid kit it needs to have, and a lot of stuff, and it just isn't enough room to fit in the back of the Dodge Cab. If you go to the next page, I'd like you to take your pen, if you would, please, and you see cruiser number 8 and 9. Ask Naomi to update this, but since we put this together, sold for scrap, basically, right? How much did we get?
You get $1,000 for car 8 and $700 for car 9.
Right. Car 8 was the chief's. It's a regular. Oh wait a minute.
Blue Taurus.
Yeah, it's a Taurus. It was a regular car off the floor. Why they bought it back. Pursuit vehicle. Replacing vehicle 6, pushed down for the chief's day-to-day use. This provides a town with 5 frontline police cruisers, which is the requirement that's been there for the last 4 chiefs that I've dealt with. And basically, the ACO vehicle was also scrapped the year before, I believe it was, and they were paying 60 some odd dollars a mile for the person to drive. So this year, the select board bought a used vehicle. It's a Ford Transit for like $9,000, a 2011. So basically, we now have an ACO, and we now have vehicle fit for service, whereas a Transit is a little small panel wagon. I don't know if you've seen it. It looks like a car in the front, but it's a panel, like a station wagon, if you will. It would work well, except maybe not for a cow or anything, but that's a different problem. If you want to know kind of what the attributes of a pursuit vehicle is, this is all the stuff that's more heavy duty or a larger capacity than what a regular Taurus out of the showroom floor. And it talks about why do we need the 4-wheel drive? Because we have a lot of roads in the town, even if they're class 5 paved, they're still pretty backwoods roads, and it gets pretty narrow in the wintertime, even with the plowing, because the roads are pretty narrow. Then we have dirt roads that are class 5, which we maintain, the town does. And they're also very narrow, something like Tiffany Hill, very narrow. It's hardly even 11 feet wide during the summertime. And then we have class 6 and private roads. And then we got the thousands of acres in the east-west section, which is both the Clough State Park and the Everett Dam facility. And there's people out there all the time with their vehicles, our TVs, or whatever they are, side-by-sides. And the vehicle's got to respond out there. So, and it's not exactly finished roads out there. So it makes sense to get the 4-wheel drives, and it makes sense to get an SUV for clearance and also carrying capability.
Jack, before you move on, and I hate to do this to you, but apparently Tammy is having a hard time hearing, so we got to do a quick check for her.
Do I need to speak up?
Well, no, we don't know if it's just her, and can we just stop and say to Rachel and Neil, can you guys hear Jack speaking okay?
Yes, this is Neil. I can hear Jack very clearly. A little bit of static on occasion. But again, the video, now the video is fixed, but before the video was quite off.
So
but the hearing is fine.
And Rachel, can you hear as well? We're trying to determine who is this.
I can kind of sort of hear him, but I hear a lot of static and a lot of screeching and a lot of like squealy noises. I can hear him when he's talking, but I get cut off a lot. Audio gets cut off a lot.
It's the floor where he's standing.
Oh, the floor is actually
You're back and forth on the floor.
Oh, that's my jamming system.
There you go. So unfortunately, so now we got to go to Tammy, and so if Tammy's actually having audio issues, she may want to drop and log back in then because for a connection. Say it too, but
I'm having the same issues with the squealing.
So we have to. No, it's more of a squeak. So, yeah, no, I'm joking. No, that sounds like feedback. Oh boy, this is frustrating.
I think the first thing you ought to consider for the 2021 budget is audio system and a video system that's in the 21st century. Okay.
Let's try this. just in case.
Is that a pickup mic?
It is, but it's muted and I'm not 100% sure it's working the way it's supposed to be. So
Tammy says it's blanking out and squealing. It's not the audio, not the floor. So she's saying it's not the floor. It's audio.
Want me to continue? I don't know what to do.
Just,
I would recommend them actually calling in on a phone. They can be on the computer so that they can,
See us?
but you can do both.
so that's what we did the last time with my phone.
Yeah, I'd call
Do
in
we,
on the phone.
I just, to your
Why
point,
can't they hear on the TV? Oh, sorry.
I'd recommend trying to actually, in addition to being logged in, call in to see if that
Okay.
takes care of the audio issue. And they could mute their phone, computer and listen on their phone. And if they needed to speak, they could unmute and speak on the computer.
so I shouldn't do anything with mine.
No.
Leave it alone for now. Yeah.
Do they all have the copy in front of them?
I emailed it
Oh.
as an attachment.
So I don't know what to say. We continue?
Shouldn't introduce that, but I-
And to show the future rotation of vehicles. It's not anywhere near cast in stone. Just goes to show that he would like to purchase over the course of next year's 6 years, a vehicle a year to get himself back to service level vehicles and not be continually in the junk business. A couple years ago, we were actually over, I think it was close to $70,000 for just repairs in the vehicles in a given year. And that's not such a big issue. The dollars is one thing, but somebody had to take those vehicles down to the repair shop. And somebody had to go drive the person back from the repair shop. And those people are sworn officers. So when you have equipment that's not fit for service or is prone for breakdown, you really don't have people that are, getting the whole benefits from the town, retirement, health, and pay as well, and not have them doing their job. And that's a big issue in the past, and it still probably is an issue today if we have to shuffle cars around. So most businesses would go out of business if they didn't have capital assets that are fit for service. The town of Weare, I guess some people think the operating budget is a sunk cost. It's going to cost us that anyways, but you're not getting your service delivery because if the officers are not in their car patrolling or doing what they're supposed to be doing, then you've got lost time and lost value for that expenditure. So basically, that's for the police. One vehicle. Now, Benji comes up on page 13, and basically he is requesting, as he has done, I'll reiterate last year what I said on the large trucks, the big trucks that do the plowing and the summer roads work. We went 6 years without buying a vehicle. And we're paying for it now because the oldest vehicle now is a 2000. And that was bought used as a 10-wheeler. And they're just getting more tender because those bodies, I think that body actually had to be replaced, the back dump body. But the frame is still rusting every year. So the trash trailer is in a pretty dilapidated state. That's the trailer, which you'll see on the pages back here. Page 16. It's basically a trailer which the packer shoves full with trash, and then it goes to the site where they dump it at a real bigger transfer station. And this big ram, the length of the trailer, pushes this wall back out and dislodges it all. That's under a lot of pressure. And Benji's worried that thing's gonna all of a sudden split wide open someday. And we only got 2. So that would put the town in extremis for trying to maintain the hours of operation of the transfer station. Bridge improvement. This is an issue I'll get into in a minute. And then road reconstruction is also what we use for summer roads. It's not just for, this is basically in the summertime. Whatever he needs to buy, guardrails, culverts, calcium chloride for class 6 roads, class 5 dirt roads in the town of Weare. And also crushing the bank run that needs to be crushed into 3/4 crushed bank run to put on the roads like 6 inches after they're done with the base rebuilding roads, and also shimming the roads on dirt roads that we maintain, and also in the wintertime crushing the dirt that we spread for sand for ice. If we go through here, T5 is the vehicle being replaced. There's an exceptionally happy guy in the picture on page 14. I'm not sure what he's doing, but he looks like he's happy. And basically, if they want to replace the 2004 Volvo truck, and the problem is the 2004 Volvo, and there was like 3 Volvos we got in a row, they all suffer electronic problems. They can get the engines running, but most of the lights on the dashboard are on because even Volvo can't fix these things. So they're able to get them running. They're probably not totally tuned right, but they are able to run. And the bodies are just getting very crusty as well, holes in them. And this is the principal thing we use for plowing in the wintertime and hauling gravel in summer. You can see some of the corrosion here on these pictures on page 15. So he's asking for that, and he wants to replace it with another 10-wheeler. Page 16 is the trash trailer. This happens to be a pristine one. This is the back of the one he's got. There's a lot of corrosion, a lot of rust, all the way up and down the body, and even underneath where the salt collects. Page 17 is a slide kind of showing all the hours and the age of the vehicles, and you'll think there's 3 Volvos left. Yeah, he wants to replace this. There will be 3 Volvos left after this. There was 4 Volvos. Page 18 is DPW non-road equipment, if you will. There's mowers, there's graders in there, brush hogs, loader, excavator, and such. Listing the hours, that's typically how those vehicles are monitored for their wear and tear. Notice on the bottom, Benji has even gone out to 2023, attempting to show a rotation going forwards, even though we're only required to 2026. So years out, things get shifted around depending if something breaks. I guess very, pretty screwed up. He'll substitute one of those that broke he may have been older, but it's better the condition than one that has basically become ineffective. And then DPW fleet proposed rotation. Here he shows 2021 proposed request. And then we got another 7 years to go before we can actually get rid of all of our junk, I would just call it. I think it was last year we spent just for parts, not labor, just not oil, not gas or anything, just parts for the vehicles, $107,000 just to replace the broken parts. And it's not only that, but one of them trucks break down, the mechanic has a plow route. He's got to come off, and his assistant mechanic's going to come off. Somebody's got to drive a truck out there and get the truck, drive it back. And basically there's 2 or 3 people who are not plowing the roads. And Benji last year had as many as 4 or 5 vehicles not ready to leave. And they have to go work on it before they get them out there for a storm. So again, unfortunately, in the past years, we weren't buying on a regular basis, so 6 years, and we're paying for it now. Transfer station, again, this is kind of the stuff that the transfer on page 20. Now I'm going into any questions on DPW. I want to talk about the bridge for a minute, bridge replacement. Trying to remember the date, 2016, I believe we had a disaster on River Road. The big bridge that looks like an iron bridge with the arches on either side. That was replaced, and I think in 1999. Should have probably had a 40, 50-year lifespan. But unfortunately, when the state comes out every year and evaluates bridges and culverts in the town of Weare, across the state actually, we came up with 3 bridges on the red list. And what that means is they degrade the performance, meaning the weight on those bridges. So Naomi and I think it was Benji or Carl at the time, I can't remember who it was. They worked with the state and they said in 2016 engineering requirements and replacing it in the early 2020s, like 2021, $2.1 million for those 3 bridges. For the big bridge, 1.5, for the smaller bridges, 300, to a total of 2.1. We are required under state law, if we wish to have their 80%, we gotta have at the ready 20%, or you don't go on the top of the list. So unfortunately, Naomi, so what we did was over the last 4 years, we had $105,000 raised for the last 4 years for 420, which brings us up to 20% of the 2.1. Now, Naomi, you tell me if I'm right or wrong. They kind of said that we've been kicked out to 2025, 2026. 2026. So technically speaking, we're 2 or 3 or 4 years beyond the expected date, which 2 things would happen. One is it could be an inflation for construction and material, which we haven't accounted for in the current 420. And the second is the assumption going in is that the bridge abutments, the concrete, wouldn't need to be fully replaced. They may have to have been a little, fixed a little bit, or maybe some erosion's been on it, but they weren't going to replace those bridge abutments, which is very expensive. It's really for the steel. They can't guarantee that there isn't legislation, EPA or DES legislation or best practices that would drive us to change those abutments. So there's a risk out there in the future years. So we have both risks. And on top of that, we've kind of gone beyond the 5-year Band-Aid that we put on River Road. We actually have to, I don't know what it is, $20,000, $30,000 we have to raise and spend to fix that River Road bridge.
That we did?
We did.
Yeah, we did. We didn't, that year we took it out of Benji's budget.
Well, I'm saying we did spend
There was like $60,000.
$60,000.
Just for the repair.
And that's just basically taking some steel plates and planing beside the vertical part of the I-beam. Just so, because you could actually take a hammer and drive a hammer through it. It was totally rusted. It's supposed to be like 1.25 inches thick. It was totally shot after like, I don't know, 16 years. So there is a good chance that the state come back and say, oh, by the way, you got to put another patch on that. Because we only patched the end that was closest to South Weare. And we didn't patch any other 4 sections. So it's possible the other sections could be having a problem. So Benji's requesting $25,000 be added to that capital reserve in the event of 1 or 2 things, 1 or 2 or 3 things. In the future, the cost of doing the bridge is higher because of the abutments, or just inflation for the length of time before we get to replacing it, or another repair along the way, which would be above and beyond. That'd be disposable because they're just going to patch it to make it work for another 3 or 4 years. So he's asked for $25,000 to do that. Now, the other one I want to speak about is the road reconstruction. Last year was $500,000. And I know Benji is very appreciative that the town supported the $2.5 million road bond that we put on a year ago, 2 years ago. But to be honest with you, if we had been buying enough, or if we had been had enough funds to do the necessary asphalting each year, we wouldn't have to buy that 2.5 million. So we basically bought a lot of time back on the road by putting an extra layer on the road, like an inch, to shim over it and overlay. That, if you hadn't have done that, you would have had more roads just gone totally to pieces. So you have to totally rebuild it. What I'm saying is, even 500,000, he's asking for an extra 25,000. That's just a move in the direction. For the roads that need to be, every year roads need to be done. He barely has enough to fix the dilapidated red roads, meaning a condition that just can't be shim or overlaid. You got to rip it all apart. So we did do most of the yellow roads, which are the ones in need of a shim and overlay. But every year we go by, there's more of those roads turning from green to yellow, and then they're in need of a shim and overlay. So history shows we want the 500,000 or the 480 in the previous years want enough to keep up. So he's requested, based on all the other budgeting issues, that he at least gets the $25,000, and he would spend that in the current year, because that's basically what has his people. And most of that money for the summers is the labor's taking care of, the vehicles taking care of, the fuel is taking care of. This is basically to hire a contract like the DNR, R&D paving. They come in for so much a ton installed on the road, and you may have to provide some flaggers, but for the most part, this contract labor, a lot of this is being spent for this extra money. So it'll buy asphalt on roads that are now getting a little long in the tooth. So that's a plus up from last year of $25,000. So moving on to 21, page 21. Board of Selectmen requested library AC units to be replaced. These are mini splits. They've been around for quite a while. And even if they were perfect in their day, efficiency-wise, just for electricity cost is much higher than you can buy for replacement today. And plus they're inefficient because not only the older design for the efficiency level, but they're also in various stages of ill repair. So the request here is $29,500 for AC for the library. I think that's, I don't know how many units there are, but I think that's pretty straightforward. You got a bid on that? You got a couple bids? Three bids. So it's a reasonably solid number. It may come in a little bit less, but the intent is to buy the most efficient inverters, which is the motors that run the actual compressor here, the outside unit. So that's the request that's made on the library. Moving on.
Jack, just to clarify, did you say there's 3 AC units?
No.
1 AC unit?
No, there's multiple.
Okay,
I
so
don't know
it's,
how many there are.
but so what does it say RF communication study in the library page? What am I missing?
Well, there's two things here.
I'm just confused, that's all.
We just combined up a couple pages.
So you were just talking.
See the AC library, see the AC?
Yeah,
That's relevant to the topic down below. Flip to the next page. Communication studies.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, if we just tried to save a page.
Well, the only reason I asked because you said 29,500 and I didn't know if it was a misprint in that request.
Oh, I'm sorry.
column.
I read the
So
wrong
I just
line.
wanted to make sure
29. Sorry, you're right.
what we were talking about, that's all.
So that's 3 cents on the tax rate. I don't know how many units there are there. Is it like 3 or 4? I don't recall either. And then the next one is the RF communication study. And what this is the town has made incremental upgrades to the police, fire, and DPW radio system over the years. And I'll get in there a little bit further, but it's pretty much inadequate for complete coverage across the town. And you may hear about this stuff, one of the issues were up on Buckley Road. There was a shooting, and there was some limited or sporadic communications to try and call in extra help. And that was a real issue. So the select board, well, actually the police put this forward, and Naomi and I talked and got kind of a head nod from the select board that since this services 3 departments, it ought to be a select board level and not just pin it to one department. So basically, there is an RSA that was quoted by the police chief. Safety provisions, administrative penalty. Every employee shall provide. Every employee shall employees with a safe environment. You could argue that possibly the police and fire are not necessarily safe because they can't actually fully communicate to call in help as necessary or backup. Why does the town of Weare need an RF radio communication propagation study, or why bother? The system's we need a reliable system, well-connected radio frequency communication system. Current capability, the town of Weare has the PD, the fire department, police department, and DPW. We buy a lot of equipment, the buildings, vehicles, highly trained personnel, and we have an RF system that really doesn't meet the town's needs. So it's really a question of a leverage. You know, if we go out of our way to hire certified people, whether it's a person driving a truck, they're a CDL license, or a fire and police, they're trained up to the level required. We provide them with the facilities and all the necessary equipment. And yet the communication system is quite lacking. The issue, in order for the town to meet expectation of life and safety, the RF communication system needs to be improved for connectivity, which means being able to reach, and reliability, meaning it'll stay online when it does finally reach the intended person. Mitigation, we're asking for a propagation study to look at identify any implementable and cost-effective solutions. Now, let me explain what this is. Let's get a little bit of history. Back when I was going to school, you could look right out over Tom's head right there out to the window, and you would see Mine Hill, and you see a tower out there with a single antenna on top. That would be for the fire department. It was just a single radio antenna, and it blasts as much as it did, and whoever could hear it was fine. Who couldn't, they didn't know it. So it was a very rudimentary system back in, I would think, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, including the 80s. In the late 90s and early 2000, some fire department obtained some grants, and they were able to implement the beginning of these repeater sites. And just look in the bottom here on page 25. You see the green dots. Gotta kind of crank your head around. The green dots are these repeater sites around town. The red triangles are the cell phone towers. Well, if you kind of look at this, you say, why are they shaped like a letter C on the town of Weare? Well, that's where 77 and 114 is. They try to cover the people who are driving through in their cars, plus most of the people live on those roads. So basically, on Mine Hill, right here to the middle left, that's where the base station is. If you look out the window during the day, you'd see it out there if foliage is off. So the issue here is the town of Weare has made some investments over the year, either through grants or some purchases of some equipment. We finally got up in the late 2000s. We had 10 voter repeater sites. That's what these green dots are. And then what they're intended to do is provide additional coverage where you can't necessarily get from Mine Hill. It allows you to get additional coverage. The real problem with this isn't so much getting out there. problem is getting back, because the general communications for the town radios is the VHF, which is sort of like your FM channels in your radio. Yeah, it's 160 megahertz. That's somewhat tolerable in terms of the propagation. It doesn't attenuate very much going through air. It's better than UHF, which is the return going back. So even if you can get it out there, quite often the police, the fire will say, I can hear somebody, but they can't hear me. And it's because of the problem with the architecture, where the UHF signal going back is more susceptible to moisture in the air and foliage. And that's principally the reason why our system has some limitations. And if it's snowing out, raining out, more moisture in the air, more attenuation. So just happens to be the rules of physics. So what we did do in 2010s, sometimes like in the middle, like 2013, 2016, thereabouts, we did manage to take, and Mine Hill now is occupied by Granite State Telephone. That's where they put their microwave towers for communicating long distance phone calls. And they also rent space to cell service. And we actually got to put our 3 antennas for our 3 services on the top of that. And that allows us to have the best place we could possibly get on the top. And we also have the advantage of having emergency backup power, because the cell tower is rigged up so it's got a generator in case it goes down, and the microwaves as well. So we also did that. And because initially these remote sites, 7 of them, were solar panel battery backup, because most of these locations are not in the best place that you would want in the town of Weare. They were a matter of convenience. And what I mean by that is not many people want to have an antenna put in their front yard. On their front yard. The only place in town where a site is on a system subdivision. Now those systems weren't placed as a potential radio tower site. They weren't for the purpose that they were kind of for. Like an Eleanor Lane, that's down in a hollow. Doesn't even work because it can't get the signal in or out. So it's kind of useless. But at the time, all they had was battery backup, and that doesn't even have any power near it. So what we did is we did ask for 7 to be upgraded to AC power. And that basically, in order to extend the battery life, the transmitters were set at a quarter of their power for extended battery life. If not, it only lasts a little while. So they reduced the power, which made it an issue on communications. But we're able to go to AC, so we get it up to full power. But even still, they're still lacking. So what is this study all about, or this analysis? There is a tool out there which is created in the 1960s for trying to determine whether to put radio and TV stations, the FCC. And two people by the name of Longley and Rice came up with a set of algorithms. And back then, it was very difficult for computers to calculate the computative intensive algorithm. But today, where you've got topography maps, topo maps, everybody know what those are for? Basically today, they used to be generated by people running around in the woods trying to decide how high we're up on the hill, when did we go an extra 20 feet and approximate the line around the hill. Today it's done by a fixed wing aircraft or a helicopter with a laser in it. And GPS, you know where the helicopter is or the plane in terms of 3-dimensional space. And you basically fire a laser vertically down, and you know how far you're off from the earth. You can calculate what the altitude is. So we have now got very reliable maps. And with the advent of these high-end computers, you could take this map, take the database that makes up this map, and create another database, which is basically a sample of a place on the earth and a vertical height off the ground. And so it looks like a bunch of pins sticking up over a map. That's the altitude. The number is the height, the pin. And basically what happens is you can calculate where, because most of these signals here are line of sight. In other words, like a flashlight. There is a little spread from the flashlight, but the main beam is straight. It doesn't really bend unless it's severe gravity, but that's another discussion. But the question is here where you can actually analyze the topography map, convert it over to this database by this algorithm. It'll give you a pretty good impression of where you can see from that antenna, the height of the antenna, what you can see on the topography reliably. And an example of that is in the back page on page 29. The only one I could actually get offline was an antenna, I think it's a TV antenna in San Francisco. And you see on the legend on the left-hand side, red is good because it's above 80 dB micro volts per square meter. That's a power that you get if you took a meter. So it's able to model by the distance and the topography. The red can be seen very well. That can be very well received. You start going out to the yellow and you start seeing some green in between the yellow and the blue. That's because it's in a valley. So this will allow the town of Weare to go off and evaluate where the best locations are in the town and how many and where to relocate these voter repeaters. And I will say at the select board meeting, R&R Communications does all of our installs. Was in talking about FirstNet capability. And they got on the subject of the value of this study is comparable. He confirmed that. He's in that business. These police officers who was tasked to go off and figure out how to do this got in contact with a company that did some work from Milford, New Hampshire. And they gave a bid for doing this long rights analysis. And those numbers are consistent with R&R Valley the other night. So it's sort of like, if you're going to do an operation on somebody, you probably ought to do an X-ray or an MRI first. This is the X-ray or the MRI. It tells you what's going on because you can tell you if you're going to have any success in coverage across town of Weare. So this is a request for that. The last page is another eye chart. We attempted to do it here. Let's go back 4 years, 2017 to 2020. And we'll list all the things, and we also go to the out years, all the way out to 2029. 7, 8, and 9 are all grouped together off all these various rotation charts that were in the pitch. And basically, once upon a time, we did have a DPW garage bond, which is paid off. And we now have a road preservation, excuse me, it's not paid off, I'm sorry. It's still got paid out to 2027. And the road preservation bonds, I think, is going to be paid out to 2029. We have short-term leases, which were paid off. The greater lease was paid off in 19, and the ambulance lease was paid off in 20 and 18. We also have in-year capital request total. Those should add up down through there. And then we have a total debt and capital request. And when you get down to the bottom here in the green is the net after taxes. Everything to the left of the bold black vertical line is actuals, have actually happened. So even though we asked for more capital requests, not on this page, only the ones that got voted in by the town. Everything to the right for 2021 is request, because we haven't had the vote yet. So basically last year on the green for 2020, based on the warrant articles that passed, we had 1.222 $1,222,392 and we got 1.201 this year. So we're down about $20,000 from last year actuals to this year's request. And if you look at the impact of taxes, which I mentioned earlier, the 1.39 impact of taxes $1.39 for 2020, and this year it's $1.35. A little bit of that is because the net present value of the town has increased a little bit as new properties come on board. And that's pretty much the pitch.
Thank you, Jack. So does anybody have any questions for Jack?
We try to make the package as detailed and as explanatory as possible. If there's more details on these items, you could always, I suspect sometime you're going to get the department heads in here.
Yeah, we're talking about it possibly for the next meeting.
Yeah, and they would be, I mean, these are the people that brought it to us. I think they've seen the package. They shouldn't be surprised what's in here. So, I mean, I've given what I understood from the committee. And by the way, this is this was voted in by the committee of 6 voting members. Actually, we allowed the selectmen, Johnny, to vote, and it was 6-6. So from a committee standpoint, we look at the need from the town, and that's our job from the CIP. If we didn't have a CIP, there is a possibility that the select board would never see in a concise manner, unless they did it themselves, a CIP request. And I'm not suggesting they would, but they could cook the books, you know, but this is a sort of a public forum to them from the planning board. Planning board's in charge of land use, the master plan. Half the master plan is how you develop the land. The other half is CIP, how you fund the capital projects called out in the master plan. Now, everything in here is a replacement item, not a new asset requirement. So we're just replacing stuff that's overly worn out. And if you ask Benji how many trucks would he like, he said I could use 3 more, but I only want 1 because I want to have 1 than none. And so unfortunately, I know there's tough times out there on budgets and personal people's positions, but looking back with perfect vision over the last years that I've been involved, we have not been adequately buying replacement assets. The roads, these roads have been here for a long time. We just haven't put the money into it. Okay. Vehicles, we were buying a while back, no vehicles for 6 years, and we did buy a vehicle. It was a worn-out vehicle in the form of a dump truck, which we have to replace a body on the back a few years afterwards. So it isn't like we're just buying these as new requirements. We're satisfying the existing requirement with a new replacement vehicle. And over time, there should be a benefit to the town because the repair costs should go down. And the piece you don't see is the hidden scrap, as I used to call it, working. Anything you can't sell as a service or a product to a customer is scrap. If a patrol car isn't patrolling with a person in it, it's going to the repair shop, or somebody's bringing him back to the repair shop and going to another vehicle, that half a shift is lost forever. Same as the truck drivers. You know, if they aren't in the truck getting paid, whether that truck wheels rolls or not, they're getting paid. And guess what happens? They make it up with overtime.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, we don't track labor like I do in the military Department of Defense contractor. It's down to down to a tenth of an hour, everybody. And you know exactly what everybody's doing. And when it's down and idle, you know how much you're losing. Here, people get paid
the way the labor is tracked. You can't tell when people are down and idle to see what it's really costing you, but it's out there. That's something you should talk to maybe the department heads like Benji and the police chief. That's been his biggest gripe. No other question? I'll take the rest of the night off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. You have a nice day. Thank you.
So we skipped ahead. I say we go back to the subcommittees. Unless anybody's opposed to doing that, I'd like to go right back in order. With no objections. Let's go forward. I don't think we have a lot to talk about with subcommittee reports. So as far as, I don't have my sheet, the town is concerned, the people that are on our town subcommittee. Oh, I have the sheet here somewhere. Oh, here it is.
James and I are the two who are here.
Rachel's on the phone too.
Oh, sorry, Rachel.
So the three. So I would say for the town subcommittee, do you guys have anything to report, discuss?
I can take a couple of minutes. James, would you prefer to?
If you're, go ahead.
You sure? Okay. Pretty much, we've had a presentation of the estimated revenues, which, and again, this would be the estimated revenues for 2021. And there are revisions all along the way. Before we go to deliberative session, there'll be a different figure. And then next March, next October or so, there'll be other adjustments. But right now, it shows that there could be a decrease in revenues of as much as $356,000. But again, this is preliminary. That's where they are at this point in the budgeting process. The default budget, and Beth did a great job of showing why the default budget is what it is, because there are a number of things that were voted in by voters last year that impact the upcoming budget, and they include the collective bargaining agreement, which will reflect on increases in the 2021 budget. There were raises for non-union employees that will be carried forward as part of that. We hired an additional DPW employee, continued with Bob Vizina and the fire rescue plan on transitioning to some full-time employees. And so that would carry on. And there was also a library warrant article, and those all would actually make the default budget 2.49% higher than what the strict budget was last year. So anyways, there was also a line by line default budget, and all of this will be presented, I'm sure, when we get the department heads together. We also had a presentation by the police department with their budget, and for fire and rescue with their budget. And the fire rescue will again be looking for continuing their move toward more of a full-time department. And again, Bob Fazina will explain that to you, but there will be a proposed warrant article to add 2 more people to that staff. So I assume that next week, the next meeting, you'll probably be hearing the DPW, and then we'll be hearing from them all, I guess, 2 weeks from today.
That was what I asked Naomi if there was availability for the 3, and I don't know if you confirmed or you're going to confirm. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the intent, what I was going to put on the agenda.
There are some other general things that kind of like on Monday night, they decided on an estimated amount to put into everybody's budget for fuel, vehicle fuel. They have the total of mileage for the different departments and what they do to calculate what to put into their budget. The Board of Selectmen come up with an estimated fuel costs for diesel and for gasoline. So they're using $2 for gasoline and $2.15 for diesel. as their estimated costs for the 2021 budget. So, again, we're going to hear all of this in detail, so I'm not going to go into it now, but those are the things that have been covered. If I missed anything, please. James.
Did you talk about the tax rate 7 projection?
No, actually, I'm going to do an article on that tomorrow for the newspaper, but the tax rate was set at 23.95, and that was up from 23.71. Yeah. And I did some research on that just for your information. For those towns that have reported, they're listed in the DAR website, Department of Revenue Administration website. There are a few surrounding towns that haven't reported yet, for example, Henniker, but I think their holdup was probably the same as ours because they had to get their figures together from the schools. But we have, that represents the second lowest of our surrounding towns. Dunbarton is slightly lower. And they're all in the ballpark though, around that $24, $26, $28 amount, but ours would be the second lowest, taking in Dunbarton, Goffstown, Deering, Hopkinton, Concord. Again, I couldn't get Henniker. I forgot, maybe another, Warner. Those are the ones that I was able to get figures on, and we are the second lowest with that figure. And read all about it and Where in the World. Which, may I just ask a question? For this committee, would anybody object to be added to our mailing list so you automatically get that in your email? We've generated a list of over 200 people that it just automatically goes to on the second and fourth Wednesday of each month. So you don't have to look it up on the library website or something. So, we'll add people to the list for the committee if you'd like.
Well, I mean, I'll speak for myself and say yes, because I read it on Facebook.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, so
That's what I'm
you can
saying.
send it to me. So
Does there anybody object to having your email?
I think we already get it.
Yeah, you probably do. We have a lot of people on the
We do, yeah.
on the list already. But
thank you.
read
That's
all
helpful.
about it.
So the only thing I'd like to add to the projections that sorry.
It's just because you're far.
Far away.
And now I am close, and that concludes our Sesame Street. Okay, so the fund balance going into from 2019 was $1,594,972. We're going to be the town, the selectmen have suggested retaining 5%, which is the recommendation from the state, and they are going to be returning to use to offset the tax rate. Right, it was $350,000, which is approximately 7.8% of everything. So this is actually a fairly large amount that they are using just strictly to reduce the taxes. They're not putting anything significant towards any other proposal at this point anyway. So when we look at some of the past years, this is one of the largest chunks that they've used for that.
Thanks, James.
Just to add a little bit, the DRA recommends from 5 to 17%, and so retained, and that represents 5% of the total budget for schools and town, John Stark, everything together, in order to have the proper cash flow, because the money collected by the town is also the money, we're the only ones who collect taxes. So that school money has to come out of that same pot in order to maintain the cash flow. They recommend that we retain between 5 and 17%. The town typically has cut it close on the 5 and managed. So we haven't had to go out and get what is called a tax anticipated loan. That's only happened a couple times in the last decade, I think, if that.
So, yeah, I mean, thank you. I'll say that the reports, although it's something we're probably going to hear again, I actually like to hear a little bit of insight from the subcommittee. So that's my personal opinion. So appreciate that feedback. That being said, Rachel, anything to report or this, talk about on town subcommittee?
Nope, they covered everything that I had in my notes, so we're good.
Okay, so I guess we will shift over to Stark, which is, oh, I didn't write that down. Which one was Stark? I just said the people. Maggie, you're not Stark, you're Weare School District, right?
I'm Weare School District.
Okay, so that would be Nicole, Neil,
Stark
Gary, and Chris.
Just going back to look at the minutes. What you put you?
So Gary's the Neil's on the one.
Yeah, Gary, I have that right, correct?
It's Nicole, Neil, Gary,
But I wouldn't make
Kristen.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's nothing to discuss, it means this is an opportunity, of course. So I would say so who's on the phone? Neil, I heard from Gary, and Nicole is not in attendance. So I guess, Neil, is there anything that you want to share a report for Stark Subcommittee?
No, Tom, I haven't attended any meetings of the Stark School Board. I'm not aware of the status of their budget negotiations.
So then the question I would ask for Stark is, I haven't actually looked because of some personal issues I've been dealing with, but when is the next school board meeting? And is there a way for us to now listen in?
Well, I can go to the next one. I think it's on a Tuesday.
I can look it up right now. Well, I was trying to find. Let's see.
And so is anybody familiar? I mean, can we all now listen in to those meetings? I don't know if that's all been resolved.
Anybody can listen in on the
On the Weare ones, right? So
I think John Stark, you can listen in as well. It looks like they have out the agenda. The next meeting is December 9th. And I'm looking to see, have a link. I believe that it is via Zoom. I can verify that.
no, I really, the date was the most important. And if anybody had logged into one, that's really what I was curious about. So December 9th, that's a Wednesday.
Correct.
Did you have the Weare one there too, Megan?
The next Weare meeting is actually on the 30th. And that's their school board budget meeting.
November or December?
November 30th, the workshop, yes. I put meeting, yeah.
Board workshop.
Yep. And then their next meeting after that is
December 15th.
Yep, I was getting, yeah, it's December 15th, yep.
Are any of those conflicts this night?
Nope.
No, because they're on a Tuesday.
No, that 9th, and yeah, that 9th was an off.
Yeah.
I think it's an off. Yeah, that's an off Wednesday. The Stark School Board.
The meeting was December 15th.
That's what the second date she said.
Yep.
Yes,
December
correct.
15th. For the record, Meg and I were talking about a shared calendar for everybody. She set one up. I wasn't able to get into it. I had some technical challenges and then a whole bunch of other challenges. So
And I never sent it to you again, so it's okay.
if we get around to it, the whole idea is we could have a moving calendar where as we discover what these meetings are, we can easily add it and everybody will have visibility. That's what I was hoping for. Now we'll see. We'll see if we can make it work out. I guess we're
We'll get
open to
those
help.
Technical challenges.
Yeah. All right. So, anything else to add for Stark Subcommittee? If not, we'll move on. With no response, I will go back to new business. Jack, we thank Jack for his time.
Skip to Weare School District.
Oh, Jesus. Good thing you're here. Sorry.
Glad I could have.
Weare School District.
Do you want me
Which
to go? Or
is-
you want to? I mean,
I can start it if you want.
yeah, you want to start it and then,
Because there's a few things that I thought got glossed over quickly, but they'll be worked out, I'm sure.
Yeah.
They had, the school board met last night and everything was by Zoom. So we could listen in on and could ask, I think you did ask a question, Megan, at one point. They had not, until yesterday afternoon, they had not put out a draft budget, just a first look. That came out in the afternoon and then was presented last night by the superintendent. The bottom line for 2020 to 2021 to 2022, because they're on a different calendar. Their draft proposed budget was 8% higher than their current budget, the actual budget that they're operating under. And the superintendent caveated that by saying, obviously, when we go into our budget work session, workup, we will be looking at it with a sharpened pencil. And I would hope that would be true. She also said that part of the 8% was really the increases in primary increases were increases in contributions to the New Hampshire healthcare, to the New Hampshire retirement system, and increases in the healthcare costs, which they have to build into their budget, I think, maximum that can be. So that's what they build into their budget. It may not be that, as we have had in other years, but that's what they build into their budget. And then they had some, I think they had some technology or computer cost issues, but that was basically just a broad brush. Bottom line, 8% is what they're going to start at and then work from. What wasn't discussed last night, I do note that their teacher's contract, they didn't get into any of that discussion. I don't know if they're having contract discussions with teachers, but that teacher's contract expires in this next summer. So when I did call up there, they said that yes, depending how any negotiations go, that could appear as a warrant article. It may not, but you could be looking at what is now a large percentage increase in the proposed budget, along with perhaps a teacher's contract potentially. But I said they didn't discuss that last night. I'll also note that proposed budget is, and I can just give you these. This is just a 2-pager, so it gives the broad categories. That's what's on. This is on the website.
Awesome, thank you.
If you go into the SAU website, you'll have access to budget information for both START and Weare.
That one. And printed off myself.
Look at that. It's I think it comes out to, what is it, 16.99 million, basically 17 million. And if you look at the as compared to, just so you have it relatively looking at, you'll see the 19-20 actual budget was 14.4. And the 2021 is 15.7, and this would be 16.9. If you also look at some history on expenditures, for the last, when I looked at it, the last 3 years, there's information out there that says basically their actual expenditures between 14 and 15 million each year. So, but they've actually spent over the last 3 years, and what they're requesting is about a $3 million difference. Also, although they didn't get into that last night, but if you look at some of the records, they're down, the student population is down from where it has been. They did note that in their letter, I think the report. Yeah. They say they're down over SAU wide, I think is 100 students or so. And Weare, I believe it's about 71, I think is the number I found. And they say that a lot of those are people who have elected to homeschool because of COVID. It could be a COVID impact on that. But if you also go back to the highest population levels we had in a given year, I think I have those. Yeah. If you look at populations in where, this is where the elementary school and the middle school, does not include, nothing to do with start. October 2016, we had 1,027 students. And today, if you reduce last year's October number by about 70, you're down about 880. So you got about a 13% drop in the number of students that are serviced in the school system. But yet that request is going up about 8%. I'm not trying to, I just throwing some facts out there so that we don't lose sight of some of this other information.
Daughter's graduating class was more than 1,027 kids.
What's that?
My daughter's graduating class was more than 1,027
Yeah,
kids.
yeah. Big. Well, we live in Weare now. right. Yeah. Just moving back for a second, they did discuss some of the current budget issues. And there have been, to this year's budget, they have added, there's been 2 grants. There's a care funding grant. That's a $91,000 supplement that came in and can be used. That can be actually used to September of 2021. And they'll be, the superintendent will be discussing that with the business manager and others as to how best to use that funding. And there is no constraint, there's flexibility on how they can use that funding is what they said. You could look at Chromebooks, they could look at whatever. There is also a supplemental public school response of 191.6 thousand that just has come in. And that is based, that number they came up with for where students is based on $200 a student that's in the school system. They went out statewide, $200 a student to every school system. So it's 191.6 thousand. That money has a window period for use from last March through December 30th of this year.
Yeah.
And what they're trying to get their hands around right now is they want to get the most bang for the buck. How do they use this money most effectively for where? If you go back into March, that's last fiscal year. So they're trying to look at anything that can be identified that was COVID related. They will apply that to that because they don't want to just look forward and have to end up not using all the money between now and the end of December because then they have to turn it back in. So they're going to identify what can be used here. And then I think they're looking at how, all the legalese, whether it's appropriate. But I think what I read out of this, correct me if you read something different, Megan. They want to be able to say, we applied, let's say they took 50,000 of this and they applied it to some purchase back in March. They would say that takes care of covering that grant money, but will also allow us to take, since that's already been spent, we'll be able to move that 50,000 forward to be able to be used by us now. Okay.
That's the way I understood it
Yeah.
as well.
And if that's reality, it gets dumped into the regular budget and they're not restricted by the 30 December. They could use it anytime.
Well, I think that I'll let you finish, but my interpretation was that it sounded like, and I was going to ask for the questions, was we're restricted by this December 31st. And like she made the comment, like, we'd like to use the money for the Chromebooks, but the Chromebooks are on the boat.
Right.
So we can't use the money for the Chromebooks because there's no Chromebooks right now to be able to be purchased. So I think I was going to ask further information and like clarification is that they're trying to kind of use the expenses for March and everything so that they can use this money for the Chromebooks.
Yeah. And
for other things that are COVID related, it's just that deadline of, because they said they were given, he made the announcement on October 17th, and then November 4th, 5th, they were given the info of like, this is how much money you have, and this is when you have to spend it by. So it's a really short window of time for them to actually spend the money. And in my eyes, they're trying to do it smartly so that they can get used to the money that it's not coming to where tax, but like it's not coming out of our property taxes.
Yeah. They're just saying, hey, this money was used. It was actually used on paper back in March.
Yes.
So therefore, that's been spent. And now anything we move forward, we will start spending on this between now and December 30th, perhaps. But
Yeah.
what's already been spent has been identified in this file, so that we don't have to take it out of this pile. Now it's in our pile.
Yeah, so if we actually,
Moving forward.
yeah, so if we receive the bill for the Chromebooks on January 19th, we can use the money that was from that pile from March to pay for that.
Right.
And just a clarification, because in case somebody has a question, the 191,600, if they don't use it all, it doesn't go back to the Weare taxpayers.
Right.
It goes back to the state.
It goes back to the state.
It was interesting.
Did you catch the amount that they said were coming back to the taxpayers?
That's what I was trying to look up. I thought it was.
Yeah, it was really.
I thought it was like. Well, they've said it more clearly in other meetings. I want to say it's, and I must have written it in a different book. I think it's like 700,000.
It was a lot. Again, we had an article on that because the superintendent was quoted. Patty Osgood wrote the article, but
Yep.
it was a very substantial amount for Weare and for John Stark. And it looked to me, just roughing out the John Stark division and the Weare, that we were talking about like $900,000 between those two. But the way that it works, the way I understand it, is that they just, and I think Naomi has a better idea of this than I do, but it's applied toward the appropriation from that fiscal year, so that they are taxing less because they're taxing on what was the approved appropriation minus what they have to give back. So it's not like with the town where we give back and it goes into a general fund. It's just that it goes back as far as offsetting tax rate because it's never spent to begin with. So they lower the appropriation by that amount. And that is how that it affects the tax rate. Am I correct on that?
Do you have the tax rate form?
I don't think I brought that with me, no. Yeah.
Yeah, so the Weare school was 789,307, and John Stark was 418,175.
Yeah, so I can't my number. I know that it's not an even split of half, but I just said, well, what's half of John Stark? But I know we're more than half as far as our enrollment. So that's where the 9 that I was saying comes from.
Okay, I think that's all I had out of my notes here. Again, I don't know if you got anything.
Yeah, the
more.
only thing I was going to say was like, you talked about the health insurance. They were saying that the max is like 7.3%,
yeah,
which is, I think, is a big chunk of it. So she was saying the 4 major factors impacting the budget was the health insurance, retirement, the impact of COVID, because they're trying to determine the ongoing cost of COVID. Nursing needs, increased technology support needs, and increased in lines for protection and cleaning supplies. And then they talked about the adequacy, which the way that they do the adequacy, I was like, I need to get more information about that, but that's going to affect the budget going up is like movement of money and how they do things. The only thing is that you're right, that the number of students went down by 70 or whatever it was. And they said the majority of those, and for whatever reason, from September and August meeting, I didn't write it in this book. It must be in the notebook, so I can next meeting. My recollection is that the majority of them they thought was homeschooled. There was a very small percentage that those students were planning on coming back to the school system. Because that makes a big difference on budgeting. Like if there's a lot of people who made decisions this year for whatever factors, being scared or just wanting more control. That a lot of factors that parents took into their decisions. So they were going to do a survey to kind of figure out, like, is this long-term effects on our population numbers, or is this just a one-off situation for this year in the weirdness that is this year? Then the only other thing that I had was just like you were talking about the budgets from the prior years. We just need to remember that 2021 was a default. And then I think 1920 was default too. Not 19, yeah, no, not 1920, 18, 19.
Yeah, there was one, the same year that they, oh, yeah, history. I know it passed one
I
year.
think so. I
thought it was 20. School budget passed.
Yes.
Between. It did pass. And last year it didn't.
So I know their years are because they have different.
Yeah.
So last year is a default. The year before and prior to that, I think they were running on their 5th or 6th year of default. So that does have an effect in the numbers. I don't know how much, but I would say that just like your comment about that, you know, the big jump. I mean that has a lot to do with the big jump.
But they're also their actual expenditures are still less than the default. But I mean, and that would happen. But
yeah,
but you're still around 14 point some billion, jumping up to 17. Right?
When they're talking this percentage, at 8%, is that calculated after they had already readjusted their appropriation number down because of the money that wasn't spent? Well, for the Weare School District, $700,000 that they didn't spend, and they had factored that into the 2020 tax rate. So was that, you know, it makes a difference. Is that 8% added on after that deduction was made? Because that was one of the things that the superintendent brought up that she was concerned about, is this money's not being spent, but now it's going to look like we've got a bigger increase next year. So wherever their base started to add that 8% will, I mean, it's still an increase, but it is not a.
The 8% is the actual budget that they were operating off, not expenditure. So the budget, that was the default budget that they were operating off of, to the proposed budget this year is 8%.
Yeah. But you understand what I mean? I don't know what figure they're using, whether they're using the figure after they readjusted it, having said, well, we're going to readjust our appropriation because we didn't spend this amount of money, which is how they were able to keep their tax rate down this year. But as you said, it means that it's going to look higher next year.
So I'm reading the adequacy thing. We received intent to homeschool letters for about 50 students since July 1st. So there's 71, that's 50 of them at least. And who knows how many after July 1st. We anticipate that many of these families will return to our schools once the COVID crisis has passed. However, our adequacy aid is based on this year's October 1st enrollment, which means that we will see a significant decrease in this revenue line. There is some movement within the New Hampshire legislature to change the adequacy formula to rely on a 3-year enrollment average rather than the previous year's October 1st enrollment number. That's all I had for Centerwoods. I think there's a lot more information to come, or at least for us to ask questions about to find out what they're doing.
So either Leah or Tammy, anything else on Weare District?
That about covers it.
No, I don't have anything else.
Okay, with that, we will move forward to finally new business. For new business, we really just have Neil had sent a proposal or process proposal document, I believe is what he called it. And I think, Neil, I don't know what precedent here is. I've never experienced this, but I think I'd just rather have you talk to your proposal. I did read it. I'm hoping everybody read it, but much like if someone came from a department head, I assume you would want to talk to that, but that's up to you, Neil.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Can
Can you hear me, Tom?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. The proposal is relatively simple, but relatively important. If this committee can figure out what it thinks is a reasonable rate of increase or decrease in spending, that is to say, not so much spending, but the tax rate, this will give guidance to the selectmen and the various school boards as they go through their budget process. And I think that's very important for those people who are actually doing the budgeting to understand what this committee's view is, because one of our responsibilities is not just to determine how much is necessary to run a particular school or the town, but also to figure out and balance what is affordable. And that conflict between what's needed to do what we'd like to have done and what we can afford to do is basically the reason why this committee was created. So my suggestion is that we try to start the discussion as to where we want to see these budgets in total, not a particular budget, go over the next couple of months. And the sooner we do this, the greater the guidance, the more significant the help will be that we're giving to the people who actually have to prepare the budgets. In the document that I've given you, I've provided some data from the Carsey Institute or Carsey School at UNH as to the impact of COVID-19 on income of folks in New Hampshire. And assuming that Weare is typical throughout the state, we happen to have a median household income of roughly $86,000. And Carsey said that families with incomes between $75,000 and $200,000, in more than half of those families, 51%, they suffered a loss of income. Not necessarily a job loss, that's a separate issue, which obviously impacted some people in Weare. But the bulk of our families were hurting financially. They lost some income. It was even worse for poorer families in New Hampshire. And again, assuming Weare is typical, for those whose income falls between $25,000 and $50,000, 66% lost income. According to my calculations, again, if Weare is typical, some 385 households suffered a job loss, not just the loss of income, but the loss of a job too. So under these circumstances where taxpayers, a significant proportion of our population, suffered some sort of financial hit as a result of COVID-19, seems to me that what we might otherwise like to spend to provide services, we really need to think about carefully to try to balance affordability with budgetary needs. My suggestion is that we have a discussion. Tonight may not be the right time to do it, although I think the earlier we do it, as I said before, the more helpful it is to budget writers, about where we think these budgets should be. And please understand that I'm really talking about the tax rate, because depending on how much new property went in town, we would be getting additional income. Depending upon the 70 students that we're losing $350,000 roughly in adequacy aid. Putting all of these and whatever's going to happen with respect to car registrations and the various other sources of income we have, we may find that budgets have to go down or budget can go up slightly and still reduce the tax rate. So my focus here is on the tax rate, and we can translate that into budget dollars, but it's really important that I think that we know where we're headed before we make any real decisions. For example, Jack's presentation tonight was very informative, and obviously we need to do a lot more research and discussion to understand all of the implications of what he's saying. But the question is, even though that went down by 4 cents from $1.39 to $1.35 year over year, is that enough of a decrease to deal with the ability of our taxpayers in this town to afford what the CIP committee is recommending. Same question with respect to any budget. So I hope we can have this discussion and not wait until January when we're making our final recommendations. It'll be much harder for us then. We'll know a lot more, but we will not really get the benefit of department heads and the school boards in saying what's more valuable, what's less valuable, how can we reduce our budget to get the recommendation, favorable recommendation, Finance Committee. Thanks.
Anybody have any questions?
Neil, discussed this in prior
I'm
years.
sorry,
Can you hear me,
I'm
Neil?
having
or
trouble
no?
hearing a lot of stuff. I can hear you now when you speak close to the microphone.
Okay.
Yes.
So we've discussed this in prior years, and I think the committee has, and I don't want to say unanimously, but we've all decided, we did decide in prior years that we weren't going to tell the town what they should or shouldn't, what they should increase it to or what they should decrease it to, because that's not our job as the Finance Committee. I was trying to look up the Finance Committee ordinance on my phone so I could read it off, but I couldn't look it up fast enough. And here, I think I can't read that far. I have my glasses on. Okay, so it says, it shall be the duty of the Finance Committee to explain the tax impact of monies raised at each town or school district meeting. That's 1. 2, review and evaluate warrant articles based on short and long-term ramifications and make recommendations pertaining to the same. 3, withhold recommendations only if there is insufficient information. So we're not here to tell the town or the schools what their budget should be. We can give them our feedback, and then they can go, like, our feedback being like, we don't know if the town's going to vote on that, but us saying like, you should decrease your budget by this, or you should increase it by, you can increase it by this percentage. That's not our job as the Finance Committee, and I don't really think that we should do that. That's the job of the taxpayers based on the information they receive from the towns and the schools and our recommendations to make educated decisions on what they feel the tax rate should be. That's at least my.
So I read I read what you read, or I understand what you read differently from the way you do. But taking your position, it's now January and we're voting on recommendations. So we're going to vote on recommendations if we think, according to you, if we think they make sense and they're reasonable, but we're not really going to look at affordability. That's not going to be part of our recommendation.
No, I'm not. I'm not saying that we're not looking at affordability, but I don't think that we can say. I don't think that it's our responsibility to say to the town and the school, you need to cut by 2% or whatever it is percentage that you have in your mind. I think the school and the towns realize the financial predicament, and we can ask the questions in the budget meetings to say, well, is this needed? And have you thought about this? And I don't think that at this time, or any time really, that we should be saying that decrease by this amount. I want to hear what they have to say. I think the town wants to hear what they have to say. And then based on feedback from us, and they have the deliberation sessions and other sources, they can hear the feedback from the town and from the Finance Committee, and they're educated people. They will make the right decision and what they feel is appropriate to present to the town they can. I hope I'm explaining.
You're explaining it very well, and you're also explaining why so many articles were defeated last year. And should we follow your advice, I can almost assure you that many more articles than last year will be defeated. Our recommendations will be overturned because we're not doing what taxpayers want us to do, which is to come up with recommendations which, as a package, are affordable and do the job of providing essential services. That really, to me, is what this committee is supposed to do. Not just say, gee, this is a good budget. They've really focused in on the things that are important, and it's going to cost this much money. You're leaving out the other half of what voters need to know from this committee.
I'd like to, sorry.
No,
Tom had his hand up. I was like, let's give the floor to Tom.
Well, first of all, the point of letting the department heads, et cetera, know what our thoughts are before they prepare the budget is a little late. Because in the town's case, virtually every department has already prepared their budget and the CIP has already been prepared and presented to us tonight. So it's after the fact. So we really can't at that point because they're ready to deliver at our next meeting here. And the Board of Selectmen have already heard everything except DPW budget. And I'm sure that that's prepared. It's just not presented yet. So it's a little late to do that anyways. But I go along with what Megan said here because we still have the opportunity. For example, if we listen to the budget presentations, there's no reason that we can't negotiate, but as a group, not as an individual, but as a group, why we can't negotiate with the department head or the schools. It's been done before. And so, we can look at a given warrant article from the CIP and said, can you wait a year on part of that? And see if there's some adjustments that can be made so that we can be conscious of the environment. But again, I don't think we can assume that everybody else is blind to the COVID-19 crisis, that the department heads, the town administration, the school administration, they know what's going on, and I'm sure that they're calculating that into the decision making without us saying that we're going to do a forum. So, 2 points. One is we can't do something now that, as far as the department heads are concerned, because they've already prepared their budgets. So we will react to those and make suggestions related to them. The schools are in a slightly different place, I guess, on their budgeting. But again, I think they should have the freedom to make up their minds and make the same considerations that your proposal has here in the background section, because they know that, it's not a secret to anybody that we're impacted by COVID-19. So anyways, I guess I'm kind of seconding what Megan had said, but with that other perspective as far as so much of the budget already having been prepared.
Leah? Sorry, Bill, did I miss?
Well, I also agree with Megan and Tom in that I think the town looks to us to do the research and the vetting of the budgets. And our recommendation to them is what they will go, not that we didn't recommend them a good budget, but that we did the research on it and this is our recommendation. And I do agree that people in this town are smart enough to decipher that. And if it works for them, they'll vote for it. If it doesn't, they won't. But it's not our job to make that decision for them. That's their job to make the decision.
Bill was next, I think. I hope.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a little different opinion. I don't know, Tom. I think that when you say it's already too late, they've already prepared their budgets. Other years, they prepare their budgets, but when they come before us, we have a chance to ask questions on those budgets. And in other years, those adjustments have been made.
Yeah, that's
based on what we say. So
I meant
it
to
isn't
say
like,
that as part of what I said, Bill.
Yeah, it isn't like it's a done deal. I mean, when are we supposed to weigh in? We're supposed to weigh in when we see what they want. We get a chance to ask them questions of why they want it. At that point, we may. I somewhat agree with Neil. At that point, we start looking at what's going to be the overall tax impact if we check off all the goodies. I mean, we all have home budgets. Some impacted by COVID this year, and we all look at what we can do this year, what we can't do. And there may be some things because of COVID that we should be sensitive to the taxpayers this year. Say, boy, if we approve everything, it's going to come out, it's going to be a high tax impact. Based on, it's not a perfect science because you don't know what the estimated revenues are going to be coming in. On the school side, you may lower student population, maybe less revenue. The estimate was less revenue here. So we look at that and we say, people have been impacted, and we need to be sensitive to that. We may look at it and have to say, as I always say to Benji, what do you want more, the plow truck or the skid steer or whatever, you know? And he always laughs. But you kind of look at it and you kind of start prioritizing. You say, they all say necessary, or urgent, or necessary. But you know, if we don't do this year, we don't do that this year. We put it off a year. Also, we're not putting it off for 5 years. Maybe we ought to put it off for a year. So those are going to be discussions that are going to come up, and we have a chance to make those adjustments. That's all I'm saying.
I agree with you. It's just a matter of when it happens.
Yeah, I think that we all agree. It's just instead of at first saying we're going to have this is needs to be your decrease.
No, I'll turn over the mic.
Yeah, you're just going to keep it.
Gary was patiently waiting.
No, I mean, I think the same thing. I mean, that's what we do. We sit here and listen to these presentations, and we keep in mind, I know, the year and how much people have to budget, and we listen to the needs, and that's when we make those decisions. You know, it seems like common sense. You know, we used to have town meetings where each of those departments got up and gave a spiel, and they were explaining why they need a new truck, why they need a new fire truck, why the schools need more facilities because they were teaching in a closet. But we don't have that anymore. They come and talk to us, and we make a recommendation, and that's the best we can do. I don't think we should pick an arbitrary number. We're just going to recommend what we think is absolutely needed. So,
James, were you waiting to speak? I couldn't tell. And I can't see Tammy and Rachel on the phone, so I'd like to say something, but I'd want to give them an opportunity first. Rachel and Tammy, do either of you have something to say on this matter? That you want to say out loud at least? I'm gonna move. I don't really have much to say other than, Neil, I actually appreciate the work that you did here, you know, to gather the background information. And, you know, we're one of those households that's experienced a loss in income. And we're fortunate, you know, we're not suffering, but I can attest to the data that you put forward, and I appreciate that. And I also think that we should, to Bill's point, we should be definitely considering that. We did do it last year, just so you know. It was my first year, but we did consider the overall tax rate and the net impact so much that we built it into the mailers, I believe, as clear as we could. And I would definitely like to continue that. But I do recall that last year, Naomi had asked of the board what our expectations were as far as the tax rate. And I believe for the most part, I got very uncomfortable and said, I'm not comfortable having this conversation because we haven't heard the needs of the town. And I want to hear the needs of the town independent of what the tax rate should be, and then have the subsequent discussions about, can we put something off till next year? We thought maybe we thought it was important. We know what they said they needed, what was urgent or immediate. Now here's the impact of the tax rate. Let's take a harder look at it. And I think that's an area that we can do a better job this year. But arbitrarily picking a number up front, I'm not in agreement with that. I think that is actually a little dangerous. We're now steering what these department heads are doing in their budgets, and I'd rather see purely what they think they need. Thank you, Rachel. So I know we didn't have a motion or anything like that, Neil. I know you wanted to have a discussion, and like everybody, we want everybody to be heard here. And so I would say to you, is there any other final points that you wanted to make on this topic?
Thank you, Tom. No, this discussion was not unanticipated. I think it's very helpful for the committee to hear it, and thank you for allowing it to occur.
And thank you for bringing that forward. I personally appreciate it. That being said, if there's no other questions or comment on the topic, is there any other, well, let me just do this first. Next week, we already said out loud for new business that we're going to have the police, the fire, and the DPW here.
Is it next week or 2 weeks?
I'm sorry, excuse me, thank you. Next meeting, which I'll get to the meeting dates in a moment. That was the only other new business I had on the agenda. So I would ask, is there any other new business that I wasn't informed of we need to discuss?
Need a minute at the end. I want to respond to something that I got an email about.
Okay.
With your permission.
Yeah, let's see. So any other new business from the committee? Neil, Rachel, and Tammy.
No.
I'm gonna have to show up at 6 o'clock next week instead of 6:30 to see if we can get the audio working better. I'm half kidding. That being said, unless the committee has an objection, I would like to hear what Eileen has to say.
I wanted to, it looks like I got an email from Neil and I just wanted to respond to it. So he was asking for a copy of my notes from our first meeting to be able to more comprehensively write his comments that he's offered to provide to the group. Neil, I don't have any notes from our first meeting. And as far as my comments, I read through Leah's minutes. And to the best of my recollection, they represent what I said. So other than I just wanted to respond in the group. That's it.
And I would just take one step further to assume that Leah has adequately documented what Eileen just said.
I am doing so at this instant.
I just want to just make sure. Thank you. In terms of announcements, I really have just the one announcement, which is our next meeting date. Sorry, on my calendar here. It's 2 weeks from tonight. December. Sorry, I'm using a manual calendar. Yes, I am. Sometimes it's just easier. Yes, December 2nd at 7 o'clock. I have no other announcements. Are there any other announcements?
You know, I had one suggestion for whoever, Leah may have it, the phone number and the email address of everybody and the name of everybody. Just put it out in an email.
Oh yeah, and a name. Do we have that in an Excel spreadsheet? I just have everybody in my contacts.
We had said that I can send that out.
Yeah.
Excellent. We appreciate that.
Could you send it to me so I can?
That's a great idea. I have some email
Look at the
addresses in my
newspaper.
contacts. I don't know who it is,
Yeah.
but I know they're on the committee.
Yeah.
So before sorry, was there something else you want to say?
No, I was.
So before we adjourn, in terms of the agenda, I don't want to start a big debate, but is everybody comfortable with this agenda moving forward? If there's something that you want to change, just say it. You know, this is our meeting, it's not mine, so. Oh, somebody chiming in. Is that Neil saying he wants something different?
Nope.
I'm joking, Neil, sorry. All right, so with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 9:30. See you all on December 2nd. Is there a switch in here?